people on the internet who screech and shout things will throw around that, you don't need to do a liver detox or a liver cleanse because the liver regenerates itself and yada, yada, yada. Well, then we don't need TRT because the testicles make testosterone. You don't need thyroid replacement because the thyroid makes thyroid hormone.
Right.
If that was true, then there wouldn't be liver cancer or cirrhosis or hepatitis. So arguments like that are, I would say that a 10 or 14 day juice cleanse isn't going to help your liver, but the idea that the liver is regenerative is true. The liver does regenerate and it does heal, but I say that the liver is like Wolverine, and for anyone who has seen Logan, if you haven't seen Logan, I won't spoil the movie, but Logan is the last of the Wolverine movies where Wolverine loses his ability to regenerate, and then the plot is built around what happens when someone who can or has spent their whole life or career, we'll say as a superhero, with the capacity to regenerate, and then they lose that ability. And that's kind of like the liver. A healthy, good functioning liver will be able to regenerate, and it will be able to heal itself and take the insult of, a small stressor here and there. But once the liver crosses into a state of disease, like old man Logan does in Logan, then all of a sudden, when someone who is reliant on regenerating loses that ability, it becomes quite catastrophic.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Danny Bossa podcast. Joined today with a dear friend of mine, Dave Lee from Australia. How you doing, Dave?
Doing well, bro. How are you?
Doing pretty damn good. Dave Lee is a health coach. He has a Facebook group called Advanced Fundamental Health, the private Facebook group. He's been a big fan favorite in the TRT and hormone optimization Facebook group. I've done a number of videos with him, both here and on the other channel. And Dave is pretty much the guy that I go to anytime I have anything complex, very out of the ordinary. I won't necessarily go to a physician for this. I go to Dave. Dave is probably the most outside of the box thinker that I know. And he's got a vast array of experience that's pretty much been unmatched from anybody else in my contact list. So we wanted to have a discussion in regards to the liver. And the reason why is I've done a number of talks, and so has Dave, and we've done the talks on this together, where we're talking about guys that are having issues with testosterone replacement therapy, where they often wind up having to take an aromatase inhibitor because they're having strange estrogenic issues. And what we say is that it is very often, probably 80% of the time, if not more, due to a poor protocol. But very oftentimes it could be due to issues with the liver, potentially even issues with thyroid. There's could be a number of things going on, but we're seeing more and more people having extremely elevated AST, ALT. Maybe they drink a lot of alcohol, they have a poor diet, whatever else. So the guys that have been watching the videos then, bombard me with messages and say, okay, great, I've got liver issues. What do I do to actually fix it? What do I do to actually resolve this? And we're going to be pretty much, I'm going to call this a masterclass. Can I call this a masterclass, Dave, on the liver? Because I don't know anyone that knows liver function as well as you do. So we're going to call this the Dave Lee masterclass of how to optimize liver function for better health. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. I think it's even more fair because I haven't prepared any notes, so that will make it an even better masterclass.
Right.
Yeah, liver health is something that I didn't think I was going to get into as much. I got more into it out of necessity. One of the most interesting things for me in the liver was when I was doing some more work with plant medicine. And one thing that I found that was very interesting was there were tribes all over the world that obviously hadn't spoken to each other, that believed that human consciousness was stored in the liver. And this was something that I found very interesting. It was not something that I went, oh, that makes sense, and I believe that, and that's true. It's something that I looked at and went, okay, well, you've got all this ancient wisdom from all these different people that identified that the health of the liver so strongly impacts how someone feels day to day. And I think that's very interesting. And what I've found working with so many guys is that liver disease pops up far more than I thought it would. And it is extremely prevalent, especially something called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which gets abbreviated to NAFLD. And there are a huge amount of misconceptions around what NAFLD is and how NAFLD comes to manifest, but then also how to get rid of NAFLD. And I think those three things, because they are so poorly understood or just blatantly disregarded, if we're being honest, that is leading to a lot of people having this low to moderate intensity state of chronic disease where they've got this constant malaise going on that they may not even recognize that it's there. It's like they're hungover a little bit all the time. And these guys are going through life with essentially shackles around their ankles. They just don't realize it. And this can be a huge game changer when you actually resolve these issues for guys. And the analogy I like to use is Goku in Dragon Ball Z, which I hope everyone has watched when he trains to fight Frieza. Hope everyone's seen that. And if you haven't seen that, there's a couple of clips where he reveals that he's wearing weighted clothing, and he takes off this weighted clothing, and now he's so much lighter and can fight so much better and train so much harder. And that's what it's like when you resolve liver disease for someone who doesn't know that they've had it. Is it's like they're taking off weighted clothing that they didn't know they were wearing.
Gotcha. So
I like the term malaise. Malaise is like a medical term for feel like shit all the time, don't know why. I like that term.
Yeah, I know a few that have been going through that, and now I'm wondering, like, maybe it's just, they're not necessarily on TRT, so we're not talking about hormones, but maybe just say, hey, just get your liver addressed. So we've got non-alcoholic fatty liver, and obviously there's a number of other factors. So what does one do, first of all, to, if they just want to say, I want to just check things out, I want to just verify things, what are first of all, the lab tests I would do, or do you maybe want to start with, what are the general symptoms? Would the symptoms simply be just some form of malaise? Because in the same time, you have maybe guys on testosterone replacement therapy that don't necessarily have that malaise, but they're getting weird estrogenic symptoms, and I feel good with an AI and so on and so forth, but I feel overall fine. If I take the AI, I feel great. So those guys probably don't necessarily have that level of malaise. Mm-hmm. So what kind of symptoms can we identify as being potential issues with liver?
Yeah, and it's a very good question because it will pop up differently for everyone, and because it's like a low-grade chronic suffering state, it might be something that people have just gotten used to, which is like, oh, I've just got bad genetics, or I've just got this, or I've just got that. And what it will typically present for in terms of symptomatically that I see is stubborn insulin resistance and the consequences of that. One thing that definitely pops up, and this is another analogy I use, is like, it's like if you're on a journey to, bettering your health, dropping excess body fat and you've been obese, getting your cardiovascular fitness up, getting your strength up, all these different things. If you've got liver disease, it's like going through that journey with shackles around your ankles. And then once you get like 80 to 90% through, it's like you hit a brick wall. It's like you're not able to just get over that line in terms of feeling better, sleeping better, having that better sex drive, getting down to that lean body percentage that you want, especially metabolizing the stubborn fat depositions that people would call the estrogenic depositions, like on the chest, on the hips, the potentially, the especially unflattering areas where men will store fat. One thing that I also see pop up, which is interesting, is the sensitivity to stimulants and intoxicants. It's not the only cause of this, but when you see the guys who just react negatively to every supplement, and then now Danny's got light bulbs going off being like, oh, that's me.
Ding, 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 ding.
Reacting badly to every supplement, but especially being hypersensitive to stimulants, having one, shot of whiskey and having a hangover the next day, having one cup of coffee and just getting jacked out of your mind in terms of, physical stimulation. Yeah. This kind of stuff can come up, but not often. Generally, it's just a low-level feeling of feeling like shit. But the big thing that I've found the most interesting in my research on this is that there is this, and I'll say that it's now a myth, there's a myth that NAFLD is caused by being overweight. And that can cause it, but it's not the only thing that causes it. And what's very interesting for me is that when we look at insulin resistance and NAFLD, we look at, what's the chicken, what's the egg, what caused this first? Is the alcoholic or non-alcoholic liver disease causing the insulin resistance? or did the insulin resistance cause the NAFLD? And the current paradigm is that if you get fat enough and you become obese and you become insulin resistant, then your liver will build up fat and you'll develop NAFLD, which will make this whole thing worse. But what research has shown is that in some circumstances, the NAFLD can actually be the precursor and the catalyst that causes the insulin resistance. So having the liver dysfunction pop up first can be the thing that actually causes the whole metabolism to essentially break and create this. It's called a positive feedback loop, but that makes it sound like a good thing, so I call it a vicious cycle. Creates this vicious cycle around metabolic dysfunction. And now you've got an individual who's being told, oh, you just need to lose weight. Oh, you just need to eat less. Oh, calories in, calories out. You just need to this. But they're hitting that fucking brick wall and they know it. And they're being told by everyone, oh, you know, you just need to eat less. You just need to move more. And then the worst part is they go and get a liver ultrasound because let's say their enzymes come back and the doctor actually goes and orders it. And then they're told, oh, that'll go away. You just need to lose weight. And it doesn't happen. These guys end up developing full-blown type 2 diabetes, and then it progresses to cirrhosis. And their quality of life is just gradually more dog shit as the years go on.
Yeah. I've got someone that I'll keep it vague. Somebody I know that I have to deal with every single day who went to the doctor, had very elevated ALT, and the doctor says, you're fine. It goes away. That stuff comes and goes. And I was looking at his labs. I was like, I got him right away on inositol and choline, which he's been taking, and he's got to go do a blood test tomorrow to see if those values have dropped. So I'm curious to see if what little bit of the inositol and choline I gave him is going to have any effect. So what's the approach here? You know, they people might suspect they have it, or they said, let me just go check things out just to rule it out. I have been feeling whatever. Let me just go see if that's what it is. What would be the typical labs that would? I mentioned AST and ALT. Potentially, you can elaborate on what they are if you'd like. But what would be the typical labs that someone would need to do to assess this properly?
Yeah, so the best thing that people can do is just to go get tested. I have this this saying that I took from, I believe I took it from Chris Gresser, which is test, not guess. And if people go out and take the time to test and be strategic about these things, they can save themselves a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of anxiety around their health. So go and get a test. It's very, very easy. Now, I would just call this a liver panel. So a liver panel will contain AST, ALT, it will contain your bilirubin, it will contain a full list of all the tests that are relevant to your liver. Now, there are other tests in a comprehensive panel that will be useful in conjunction, such as C-reactive protein, HbA1c, triglycerides, all useful. But when primarily looking at the liver, I'm looking at, now in the States, I will add, there's a test called Gamma GT. That's included by default in Australia and the UK and I believe Canada for liver. It's not included by default in the States. So if you're in the States and you're getting a liver panel done, I would recommend adding Gamma GT to that test. Now, when we're looking at a liver panel, firstly, it is relatively common for guys to have a slightly above range AST and ALT. And that can be a measure of simply how hard is the liver working at that point in time. So if you took, paracetamol or ibuprofen, or, even had a whiskey with dinner the night before, or you did some squats the night before in the gym and then you got a blood test, that above range ALT and AST, that's not saying, hey, you've got liver disease, your liver is malfunctioning or it's burdened or it's sick or it's not regenerating or whatever. It's simply saying that, hey, your liver at this point of time is working slightly harder than what an average person's liver would be for good reason. So that's nothing to worry about. Most people who train, who don't specifically take a day off the day before, or take some form of pharmaceutical medication, will have slightly elevated AST and ALT. That is not signifying a problem. Now, if the AST and the ALT are jacked up in terms of, I often say if there's three numbers, get a test. If it's, the reference range usually goes up to about 40 or 50. But if the AST and ALT are increased significantly, and that is a subjective word because it comes down to your practitioner, but if they're increased significantly, then I do believe it does warrant at least a physical liver exam where the physician will physically, touch the liver in terms of poking it and seeing if it's sensitive. I often just refer guys to go straight for an ultrasound and bypass that unless the physician is particularly competent. But the main thing that you want to be looking at, in my opinion, is also a combination of the elevations in bilirubin and the elevations in gamma GT. So bilirubin is the key that we're looking for fatty liver. And this is where it can get a little bit, not confusing per se, but it can get a little bit more complicated for people trying to self-diagnose. And the ultimate bottom line here is work with someone who knows how to fix this for you so that you don't have to worry about it. But for guys wanting to understand this themselves, if you've got an elevated bilirubin, and I would even argue if your bilirubin is approaching the top of the range and you have symptoms, the range for bilirubin is usually about a 20, then you want to get a liver ultrasound to check if there's fat in the liver. However, there is a condition called Gilbert syndrome, which I assume was named after a guy called Gilbert. And Gilbert syndrome, shout out to Gil on the TRT and Hormone Optimization channel. The thing with Gilbert syndrome is that it will look like you have fatty liver disease on your blood test. You will have an elevated bilirubin. However, when you get an ultrasound done, it will actually show that you don't have any fat in your liver. And this is where this gets confusing, because we can't go, okay, elevated bilirubin, fatty liver disease. It's no, if you've got an elevated bilirubin, that is warrants you going and getting an ultrasound to check for it, but it may also be a benign condition called Gilbert syndrome or Gilbert's disease. And if you do have Gilbert syndrome for your whole life, you will have elevated bilirubin, so that it looks like you have this liver condition when you don't. So it is important, if you have elevated bilirubin, you go and get a liver ultrasound to check for fatty liver, especially if you have a history of obesity, especially if you have a history of alcohol abuse, which would be alcoholic fatty liver disease. And the other one is gamma GT. And gamma GT is more of a measurement, from what I've seen, that pops up when we're looking at something where the liver is actually damaged or the liver is actually sustaining damage. And if a gamma GT is elevated, typically I'll see this when alcohol is still being used, liver toxic anabolic steroids are still being used, other liver toxic drugs are being used. And if that's elevated, now we have a situation which is more urgent, it's more time sensitive, and it's often more severe.
Okay. You mentioned anabolic steroids. Have you seen this occur with men just simply taking testosterone, regardless of dose?
Regardless of dose is a big call.
Okay, well, if we're going to talk about you taking 10 grams a week, I mean...
I have never seen liver disease induced by testosterone only. However, I haven't seen guys running grams and grams a week of test and check their livers at the time. But the more liver toxic compounds will cause more acute liver inflammation in the short term than something like bioidentical testosterone if guys are going to push the dose. But too much testosterone will still wreck liver, absolutely.
When we're saying too much, is it serum level base? Or?
Well, this is a good question, right? Because I would argue that it depends on the guy. And this is where I think it gets a bit more nuanced. If I take a guy who's 8% body fat and I take a guy who's 30% body fat and give them both 700 milligrams a week of test, I would hypothesize that the leaner guy is probably going to tolerate that better and get better outcomes from that in terms of the desired outcome of the testosterone use, but also less side effects because his body is more primed to use it. Now, I don't think that being sub 10% gives you a free pass to take whatever steroids you want. But I think that if you go beyond the physiological amount of testosterone that your body can tolerate, which is a subjective question, I know that, and people like myself and Danny will argue that that's a little bit, probably a little bit higher than what the reference ranges would dictate.
Just a slight,
just slightly higher. Yeah. I think the reference ranges might be a little bit off. But if we're going well beyond that, we're now creating a scenario where the body is out of rhythm with itself in terms of you're putting in more hormone than your body could ever naturally produce. And one thing that is going to start to take the burden of that is going to be the liver. Now, what is that going to lead to long term? Can you just use liver support as like a prophylaxis in terms of, hey, I'm running a big cycle, I can just take this and my liver will be fine? Well, I mean, if you go to war wearing a bulletproof vest, you may still die, but you have better chances, sure.
Right.
So, and that's the way that I think that we should be viewing this, is that if someone wants to take a high dose of an anabolic steroid for a cycle for whatever reason, then you absolutely should be supporting your liver. But I don't think it should be framed that it gives people a free pass in terms of, hey, I've got my liver bulletproof, now I can do whatever I want. I don't think that's the approach.
Okay. So now we've identified some of the causes. Do you have different protocols depending on what it is? So meaning if it's strictly fatty liver, I would do such and such. If it's not fatty liver, then I tend to do such and such. If somebody's taking, as you were mentioning, maybe a steroid cycle, I would do such and such. Someone just wants to maintain healthy liver. He's run labs, everything is fine. But he's like, you know what? I just want to take something on the side just to make sure I keep liver function optimal. Can I assume you've got different protocols or different ideas of what should be used in these cases?
Yeah, absolutely. And the first thing I lead off with is that, people on the internet who screech and shout things will throw around that, you don't need to do a liver detox or a liver cleanse because the liver regenerates itself and yada, yada, yada. Well, then we don't need TRT because the testicles make testosterone. You don't need thyroid replacement because the thyroid makes thyroid hormone.
Right.
If that was true, then there wouldn't be liver cancer or cirrhosis or hepatitis. So arguments like that are, I would say that a 10 or 14 day juice cleanse isn't going to help your liver, but the idea that the liver is regenerative is true. The liver does regenerate and it does heal, but I say that the liver is like Wolverine, and for anyone who has seen Logan, if you haven't seen Logan, I won't spoil the movie, but Logan is the last of the Wolverine movies where Wolverine loses his ability to regenerate, and then the plot is built around what happens when someone who can or has spent their whole life or career, we'll say as a superhero, with the capacity to regenerate, and then they lose that ability. And that's kind of like the liver. A healthy, good functioning liver will be able to regenerate, and it will be able to heal itself and take the insult of, a small stressor here and there. But once the liver crosses into a state of disease, like old man Logan does in Logan, then all of a sudden, when someone who is reliant on regenerating loses that ability, it becomes quite catastrophic. So when we're looking at what to use for the liver, you're completely right. There's lots of different tools in the liver toolbox. I don't use that many of them because I think a lot of them aren't as effective as the others. I do think you need an array of tools when you are dealing with the liver, though, because certain things only work for certain things and don't work for others. There are some jack of all trades, master of none, like let's say like Tudka, for example, which is basically good for everything for the liver. But not all supplements are effective for everything. So, for example, milk thistle has been shown in research to be effective immediately post-liver insult in upregulating glutathione production, but milk thistle isn't going to do anything for your fatty liver. And we see this in studies. We look at these studies which we go, okay, well, curcumin or milk thistle or this other herb, these reduced liver enzymes in fatty liver disease, but it didn't get rid of any of the fat. So yes, it may act as a Band-Aid in terms of it may help with the stress on the body of having a fatty liver, but when it comes to something like this, you don't want to be taking liver supplements for your whole life. You don't want to go, oh, I've got fatty liver, I've got this liver thing, so now I have to take liver support for my whole life. You want to fix it, get Wolverine back to the point that he can regenerate on his own, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. So, yes, different tools, different horses, different courses. So, firstly, if we look at prophylaxis, which I think a lot of people would be looking at. So I look at prophylaxis in two contexts. One is that you're taking a responsible anabolic steroid cycle when you're looking to mitigate some of the potential stress on your organ systems. And the other one is you're looking at some kind of prophylaxis, which means preventative treatment for environmental estrogens. You're looking for something to help the liver support a modern lifestyle, which may be a little bit more stressful or more cumbersome on the liver than evolutionarily potentially it should have been. Mm-hmm. That's most people. And this is where I like a product called NAC, N-acetylcysteine, which gets talked about all the time in this space. Most people are familiar with it. I like NAC because it's cheap and it's super available. And if you're looking at something that's a prophylaxis, I think going for something that is cost effective for most people is a good idea, because otherwise you're throwing a whole bunch of money at something that may not even be a problem. And I think that money might be better spent on other supplements potentially. Yeah. So I like NAC and phosphatidylcholine together. Firstly, they're both essentially nutrients to the body, i.e. that they're part of our, what Paul Saladino would call the human operating system. Phosphatidylcholine being a fat-soluble version of choline, phospholipid form, and NAC being the precursor to glutathione. Now, the reason I only, and this is just my personal opinion, the reason why I only use NAC in the context of prophylaxis is that NAC is the precursor to glutathione, which is your liver's main antioxidant. So if someone's got liver disease, which would impair their body's ability to make glutathione in the first place, putting a precursor into putting raw materials into a faulty factory isn't going to get you what you want at the end. It may get you some of what you want, but it's probably not the most effective solution as just going in with what that factory would make if it was functioning well to support it, which would be something like actual glutathione. So NAC, phosphatidylcholine, so choline, for those who aren't aware, is, I would argue that it's a vitamin. It's not included in the essential vitamins, but it's a B vitamin. And what is interesting when you look at genetics is that when we go back to, well, why do some people develop non-alcoholic fatty liver disease before they get fat? Why is that the thing that breaks their metabolism? I'm not saying this is the only thing that happens, but in my research and in my opinion, this is due to potentially a dietary deficiency of choline. And what's been found in genetic studies is that some people's genetics do have a higher baseline requirement for choline than other people. Now, choline is found especially rich in egg yolks and liver, but it's also found to be very rich in red meat. So my hypothesis, and this is all it is a hypothesis, people are welcome to disagree, is that if people are developing with a lack of choline in the diet and they have a genetic high requirement for choline, I think this is what leads to NAFLD. So phosphatidylcholine, a 500 milligram soft gel, a good size egg yolk is about 100, 150 milligrams. So you're getting a good amount in with one soft gel of phosphatidylcholine per day. 500 milligrams, plenty for prophylaxis. And NAC, 600 milligrams, 1200 milligrams, 1 to 2 times per day. I like it in the morning. You can definitely take it at night. I find that it disrupts my sleep, but some people find they may not get sleep disruption from it. That is a good, cheap, effective prophylaxis that you could take long term. You would be very unlikely to get side effects from, and it wouldn't put a hole in your wallet.
Okay. Taking phosphatidylcholine versus taking straight up choline. Like
Good
when you
question.
get the supplements there, it's often an inositol choline mix. Is the phosphatidylcholine just a better version of it, a more biologically available version of it, or
more bioavailable? Yeah. So when we're looking at regular choline supplementation, we're looking at choline bitartrate. Choline bitartrate is not a bad product, and the reason why I like the choline bitartrate is that's what comes mixed with the inositol, which is the 1-2 punch for the fatty liver. But if I'm just using choline on its own, if I've got phosphatidylcholine compared with choline bitartrate has about if we're looking at phosphatidylcholine, which is like 100% bioavailable or close to, choline bitartrate, you're looking at about a 50% bioavailability. So
Gotcha.
500 milligrams of choline bitartrate is about the equivalent of a gram of phosphatidylcholine.
And is there an inositol equivalent, more bioavailable version of it?
I'm sure someone has made one. I think myo-inositol is one that comes to mind. But in my experience, and this is why it's been so good to work with so many guys on this, advising them from an educational standpoint, of course, is that the choline bitartrate and the inositol that comes in those Now Foods 250 capsules, the cheap ones you get off iHerb or Amazon, they do the job just fine. So it's
Gotcha.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. If someone came out with like a phosphatidylcholine and enhanced bioavailability inositol, would it be, you'd probably have to take less, but at the end of the day, it would probably be equally effective. There are protocols based on injectable choline and inositol for fatty liver, but I haven't been able to access enough of that to know what the equivalent would be for an oral conversion.
Gotcha. Okay. So phosphatidylcholine and NAC for prophylaxis. So prophylaxis meaning I'm going to be doing something, perhaps the steroid cycle. I'm going to be out going to a chalet with some friends for a week, drinking like a fish, I think, whatever. I just want to put in a little extra layer of protection over and above my otherwise, healthy lifestyle. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk now if you've got strictly, it's fatty liver specifically.
Right.
You've been diagnosed with fatty liver. What would be a typical protocol for that?
Right. So it would be custom for the individual, but for something that would be a template as opposed to a cookie cutter protocol, something that is based on customizing from. You'd be looking at 2 to 3 grams of choline and inositol in divided doses. So when I say 2 to 3 grams, I mean 2 grams of choline and 2 grams of inositol in divided doses for, depending on the severity, around 6 to 8 weeks. Now, there's a couple of things that I like to do in addition to this, which I would really argue are not necessary in terms of clearing the fat out, but they do make the experience not that and the thing with this is, which is why it's so fascinating for me, is that if someone's got liver disease and you put them on a liver protocol, they generally feel better within a few days. They don't go to feeling $1 million and everything's hunky-dory within 72 hours, but they go, oh, this makes me feel better. Like, this feels good. This doesn't cause side effects. So if you've got someone who's in a state of disease, someone who was previously overweight, someone who's maybe got some issues with, malaise, lethargy, just general, feeling like shit-itis, I think it's great to put in and support the liver further in terms of saying, okay, what would your liver be producing if it could produce it well, which is glutathione? Let's put that glutathione in to take the stress off the liver so that it can focus on healing. And this tends to be something that makes people feel much better, is adding in some form of glutathione to the fatty liver protocol. Now, oral glutathione, depending on who you talk to, if you talk to someone who sells it, they'll say it's bioavailable. If you talk to someone who sells injectable, they'll say the oral is not bioavailable, only the injectable works. And then if you go on Google, you'll see that there's kind of mixed evidence to support oral being bioavailable or not. It really depends on who you ask. I have found that the versions of glutathione which have a sustained release formula, meaning that they break open and are absorbed in the mucosal lining of the gut, those versions of glutathione are the most effective because that is where glutathione is bioavailable in the body. So if you're going to use a oral glutathione, I prefer a sustained release version like what Thorne make. Otherwise, injectable is great. I would argue bang for your buck. I mean, I don't know how much it costs everywhere in the world, but injectable glutathione is probably going to give people more bang for their buck unless they can get particularly cheap oral glutathione. And it also allows you to push into a bit of a higher dose as well if you're going to be using it for a short-term period. So I love adding in oral glutathione. It's not going to change the outcome of resolving the fatty liver. That's going to be the choline and inositol. But it's going to be the thing that's going to be making you feel better, which is going to be the thing that's going to be getting you moving, getting to the gym, actually finishing the protocol that you started. Compliance is big as well. This is going to be the thing that gets rid of that malaise, feeling like shit-itis for at least a couple of days after you do that shot, which gives you a glimpse of what's coming at the end of the tunnel. The last thing that I like to add in for this, if it's needed, and this will be dependent on the results of the ultrasound, which is why it's always important that the patient asks the doctor for a copy of the radiology report, not the images, the report the radiologist has written. And it will clearly state, I would hope, depending on the competency of the radiologist, whether the gallbladder is blocked or not. Now, if the gallbladder is blocked by fat, it would be advantageous to include something like TUDCA or ox bile, preferably TUDCA, to support what the gallbladder is not able to do, which is to produce bile to break down fat-soluble nutrients, because the fat-soluble nutrients are also going to help with the health of the liver. So it's kind of like you're breaking that vicious cycle now. You're putting in something to support what the body is not able to do on its own, which will help you reverse that disease state faster. The other
this would actually help the gallbladder clear out the fat blockage to allow it to then work normally, or is it just... Is it kind of like, well, I'm going to replace what the gallbladder hasn't been able to do?
It's a very good question. It's not clear how the breaking of this cycle works and what goes on. When I've looked into it in terms of, let's say, TUDCA or ox bile or UDCA, which is another form of biosalt, alone for fatty liver when the gallbladder is blocked, it does seem to support that. I think it does work as part of that mechanism, but I do believe the primary mechanism here is the choline inositol is clearing that obstructed gallbladder. And I think the TUDCA is kind of like the glutathione in terms of you're just doing what the body is not able to do for that time period and helping to resolve that disease state. But the other thing, though, that TUDCA does is that when you do have NAFLD or alcoholic fatty liver disease, it does basically feed into that vicious cycle of insulin resistance. And TUDCA is the thing that has been studied to help support insulin resistance, which has been brought on by liver disease. So if someone is dealing with insulin resistance and liver disease, like to the point that it's causing elevated HbA1c, or it's causing symptoms of like reactive hypoglycemia because gluconeogenesis is impaired, I think that putting in TUDCA, and from what I've seen, makes a huge difference to how these guys feel day to day.
Okay. So is this the case where you're adding the glutathione instead of the NAC because it's a situation where you feel that by adding the NAC, it won't necessarily convert into the glutathione?
100%.
Due to the damage, so you're giving it the glutathione directly. Okay.
100%. And you could give, if someone's on a budget, like and it's not like the NAC won't work at all. Like the NAC will work. Studies have shown that in fatty liver disease, NAC will still reduce liver enzymes. It is still effective for something. But again, when we're looking at the liver, we're looking at pathways here. So if we've got the glutathione pathway, we've got like milk thistle, which increases glutathione, NAC, and then actual glutathione. If I've got access, if the individual has access to all three tools, I'm going to go in with glutathione. But if they're like, hey, all I can get is NAC, then NAC is much better than nothing.
Okay. The person in question, he's going to see this video. I'm sure he's going to be giggling. The person in question I gave inositol and choline to, I had previously recommended 1,500 milligrams of each every day for roughly 30 days. Typically does the job. I've seen this protocol over the place. He was taking that and failed to tell me after a couple of days that he would take it at dinner, and then right after dinner he would have felt like he was having stabbing pains in his stomach. He ended up, once he finally told me, and he's like, I've been having stabbing pains for the last couple of weeks. I was like, why the hell did you tell me? Ended up dropping down his dose. I said, well, take 500 milligrams of each. Let's see what happens. Did that, it was fine. Bumped up to 2, it was fine. So apparently 1,000 milligrams of each is about as much as he can handle. And anything more, stabbing pains. Mm-hmm. I looked it up on Google, didn't find a heck of a lot. Is this anything you've seen of people just not having a tolerance to inositol and choline? Absolutely,
I've seen it for sure. And there's a couple of things. So yeah, it's one of the reasons why I like to do the 2 to 3 grams in divided doses, because generally I'll give people either a gram twice a day or a gram 3 times a day. And I don't like midday dosing for pills usually. It's just not good for men for compliancy. We just don't do it. But for a short-term period, it's doable, because you could just take, if they forget, they can take 1 dose when they get home from work and then 1 dose before they go to bed, and it's still divided. Gotcha. Now, the question is, what's causing that? And when I speak to guys about this protocol, when I'm briefing them on it, I say, look, for the first X amount of days, you may get disaster pants. You may get some metformin-esque digestive volcano butt side effects. And in terms of what's going on with that, my hypothesis is that if you're purging, well, firstly, if you purge anything, it has to leave the body some way. And generally when we think of a purge, it's either it comes out front end or back end. So the fat has to leave the body somewhere, and the fat in the digestive tract will act as a lubricant. Kind of like if for anyone who wants to find out, go and drink 3 to 4 tablespoons of MCT oil and see what happens. Don't do that. But if you drank a high dose of MCT oil with no tolerance, you would find out what I mean. The fat comes out like a liquid. No one do that. Please don't do that. That was a joke. So when it comes to this, the fat has to leave the body some way, and liquid stools or looser stools for the first few days, in my opinion, is a good sign that the fat is leaving the body. Now, if the individual had stabbing pains, then I would definitely be doing exactly what you recommended, which is backing the dose down and then retitrating back up. I doubt it would be a negative reaction because it is essentially a vitamin, but I haven't seen this, but in that case, I would be swapping them over to if they couldn't tolerate a lower dose, I would swap them over to phosphatidylcholine and just drop the inositol and see if you could get away with just that. But in that case, yeah, I would say that it was likely a purge and then titrating back up, which it sounds like that resolved the issue, right?
Or by splitting up the dose.
Splitting it up,
and not
yeah.
just taking it all at once. Which,
It's a lot to take in all at once. Like if you compare it to like eggs, for example, like, I mean, it's like consuming a whole carton of eggs on its own, but just the choline part without the other nutrients with it. So it would make sense that some people's stomachs, especially if they're not consuming much choline in the diet regularly, like let's say they're consuming virtually no choline, they're just eating white meat, no eggs, no organ meat, nothing like that, then yeah, it could be a shock to the system.
Okay. So we've covered prophylaxis, we've covered fatty liver. So now how about somebody who's got some form of liver dysfunction or minor liver damage, or it could be minor, it could be major. That has nothing to do necessarily with fatty liver. Maybe they just not fatty liver. They potentially don't even drink alcohol. They just have some kind of liver issue. Actually, we can throw in alcohol because you can have alcohol, not necessarily fatty liver. But let's just explore. It's not fatty liver related. What would be a typical protocol and why?
Yeah. So the most important thing for something like that would be obviously working out what the root cause is in terms of like, is it something that can be resolved? Is it something that the individual is doing now? And a lot of the time I find that guys just need someone to tell them and go, hey, you're not getting away with this. Like other guys might be, all your mates who go out and drink, 8 to 10 beers every weekend and they're doing well. They are getting away with it. Their liver enzymes are perfect. They're in good health. Everything's fine. You're not. And that's the thing that can be really useful for guys to understand is going, okay, I need to stop this because I've got objective feedback from my body. And a lot of the time, this doesn't actually, no, I'm not going to say a lot of the time. This has come up a few times where I'll have conversations with guys and they'll say, look, when people end up in hospital when they almost die and they hit rock bottom and they change their life? I'm like, that's coming. I'm like, you don't have to get there, but you're on the way there and you can make that decision now. Mm. And working that out, just having someone who's a third party go, hey, nah, objectively, this is not good. You're heading for a bad situation. That, if a guy's on TRT, that's all they need to hear. That is all they need to hear. If they've got the motivation and drive to be a better version of themselves, they just need to hear, cut that shit out. You're not getting away with it, and they'll stop. Now, if you're dealing with something that's residual, let's say the aftermath of something like that, or you're dealing with, some guys genetically just don't make enough glutathione, or, you may have some kind of liver issue, genetic liver issue, whatever. My preferred, again, it would be better to customize it, but my preferred template for this is a combination of injectable glutathione and low-dose TUDCA daily. So when it comes to injectable glutathione, usually people are looking at a 200 milligram per mil solution. As far as I'm aware, that's 90% of what they come in. But if not, that's what I'm talking about here. 200 milligram is a mil. And I like to get people to do injectable glutathione twice a week. And if I'm looking at something that is like prophylaxis, long-term, like chronic use, just general liver support, I think 0.5 mil twice a week, so 100 milligrams twice a week injectable is plenty. If I'm dealing with a short-term liver protocol, like liver disease, then I'd be recommending something like 1 mil twice a week, even 1 mil 3 times a week at the most. But that would just be for a short-term thing. And then for the TUDCA, if I'm using it for a short-term condition, like, reversing a fatty liver disease, or TUDCA is also great for cirrhosis as well. It's one of the only things that actually helps with cirrhosis. 500 milligrams to 1 gram a day in divided doses. But if I'm dealing with something that is chronic, something that is protracted, and something that has a long-term outcome, 250 milligrams for most people, up to 500 milligrams a day. I believe 500 milligrams a day has been studied for a year. But again, if we're looking at something that's going to be taken every day long term, I think minimal effective dose is a good idea. But the thing is with liver, you can always test and titrate up. And this is the thing that I love about liver disease, is that someone can come in with a fatty liver disease, we can give them a protocol, and then I can say, go get another ultrasound and let's have a look and see, did it work? Because there are so many things in this field when it comes to giving people supplements that is just, oh, take this, take this, take this, take this. It's like, no, let's fucking objectively look and go, did this actually work? And that's the thing I love about this protocol and love about working with livers is that you get back a clean ultrasound and you go, oh, this actually worked. This choline and inositol pills from Now Foods that cost $10 a bottle, like these guys are able to reverse chronic disease for like $100, and with no side effects. I mean, unless you take too much all at once. It's amazing. But it's the thing that I always encourage guys to do is, if you're going to spend, a few $100s on a liver protocol, if you're going to, take pills 3 times a day for 8 weeks, get an ultrasound at the end to see if you achieved the job, if you finished it off, because if you're going to do something, you're going to do it right.
Yeah. There's one thing during this discussion we've had, I realized I did something a bit silly, is I immediately started asking you about what supplements to take. And I didn't ask you about what are the things that people should be doing less of or doing more of, such as avoiding alcohol and so on and so forth. So I was maybe a little bit asleep at the wheel but I did come to that realization. So we can finish off the protocols and then just a general overview. You've been diagnosed with some kind of liver issue. You suspect maybe you have some liver issue. What are the real world things you can stop doing or start doing more of outside of the supplements to help potentially improve things, right?
Yeah. And
right. So
clearly you've been listening to my content, because this is what I don't shut up about.
So we talked about prophylaxis. We talked about fatty liver. We talked about liver issues outside of potentially fatty liver. And what about just somebody who I've got my ultrasound done. My lab values are great, but I do work out a lot and I eat a lot of protein and this and that, and maybe I'm taking some supplements, or whatever else. What can I just take to just keep things optimal? There's no real problem here. I just want to kind of keep things optimal.
Yeah, and it's one of my favorite things to talk to guys about is like, I used to work in the supplement industry when I first finished university. I did marketing at uni, and the marketing of the supplement industry is insane. Like the size of the industry is just absolutely fucking huge. So I understand, because of prolonged exposure to marketing, as well as what is available on the market, to be fair, there's a category of supplements that guys want to take, which is what supplement should I take that I don't necessarily need that would benefit me? And because there's a list of like 1,000 things, and depending on the individual, maybe not 1,000, maybe 100, but depending on the individual, certain things will take certain higher priorities. So for example, if someone's obese, they would probably have different general purpose supplements that would be higher on the pecking order than someone who was, 7% body fat, endurance runner, for example. So I find that liver health and or stress management supplements, like things to help modulate the effects of stress, are the 2 categories that most guys fall into that would benefit from when it comes to those supplements, in terms of what's something that you don't need but would benefit from. The younger guys who have metabolic issues, who may be developed with low testosterone, I also look into things that will naturally upregulate the androgen receptor, stuff like creatine and vitamin D. But when we're looking at these things, I think the liver is a good thing to look at, because we are living in a world that is far more polluted than what it was 100, 200 years ago. Everybody knows that. And depending on where you live, it could be better or worse. We do, especially if people aren't eating an ultra strict diet and, they are enjoying going out with friends for a meal here or there, they're having a drink on the weekend with their friends, they're, living life with that balance. If they're wanting to be optimal and dial in their health, those 2 things in conjunction, it makes sense to support the liver if you want to support something. And furthermore, if you're going to be doing TRT and you're going to be injecting exogenous hormones, it puts more pressure on your liver to be at high performance, at tip-top capacity, because you are injecting the optimal amount of the hormones that your body could naturally make. So the requirement for your liver is that it has to step up to be a 10 out of 10. It has to be at its peak performance. Otherwise, your HRT is not going to work properly. And this is the thing that comes up with these estrogenic side effects, is that people are talking about, I don't feel masculine enough and I've got bloating, so it must be to do with estrogen. Whereas in reality, it's like, okay, well, the liver could be a big part of that. And we have to look upstream. So for the guys who are the prophylaxis guys, I think if you're on a budget, I think NAC is the most bang for your buck, like dollar for dollar. But I think injectable glutathione is a better option, or oral glutathione from a brand like Thorne, like the sustained release. Depends what suits you better. And then just to recap, for a bit more of a stronger kind of prophylaxis, you could look at adding in the phosphatidylcholine if you're not eating eggs regularly in the diet. So NAC or glutathione with phosphatidylcholine, depending on how much of an effort and how much financially you want to invest in this prophylaxis. If you've got NAFLD, we're looking at TUDCA, glutathione, and inositol, TUDCA, choline, and inositol glutathione. And then if we're looking at just liver support for, let's say, a disease state, or maybe running a cycle of anabolic steroids, injectable glutathione and TUDCA is a good way to go. Now, when it comes down to diet and lifestyle, it's essentially do all the things you know that you should be doing and don't do the things you know that you shouldn't be doing. Alcohol is awful for the liver. The dose to intoxication when it comes to alcohol is liver toxic. And depending on people's culture and perception of alcohol will change what people think is okay or acceptable in terms of binge drinking. And I regularly see guys who are going out for, 8 to 10 drinks per week on the weekend and have been doing so for a decade, but that's normal for part of their culture. And what they need to understand is that not every guy will be able to get away with that. And that's how these guys do develop these liver problems. And then we come in and we fix it and we go, wow, okay, that made a big difference. So the alcohol is probably one of the biggest ones. People aren't going to like this. I didn't like finding out about this when I was younger. Daily THC use, not good for the liver. I don't think THC is liver toxic per se. I actually don't think it's liver toxic at all, but I think it does impair some degree of liver function where when used chronically, I think it does impair the liver's ability to detox. How and why, I'm not sure, but I've observed it, so it's a hypothesis, and that's all. Other things as well for the guys in the United States, high fructose corn syrup, that crap is awful for your liver. In Australia, and I'm not sure about Canada, but in Europe, sugar is sugar, which is a mix of fructose and glucose. Putting in massive amounts of fructose with no glucose is a fast way to develop like liver disease. Awful for your liver. So that can be a big one. So avoiding fructose, avoiding alcohol, and then pharmaceutical drugs, stuff like paracetamol, which I think is like Tylenol is a brand name for it, ibuprofen. These things are awful for the liver if used regularly and in high doses. When guys tell me that they're taking 800 milligrams a day of ibuprofen, I will immediately send them off for a liver test. And 9 times out of 10, it will come back with like not severe liver damage, but it will come back with liver inflammation and severely elevated enzymes to the point that it has to be discontinued. Those things, which and then also being overweight. Being overweight's also problematic, and making sure also, guys, that you're getting enough choline in the diet. Choline seems to be, again, my hypothesis, choline seems to be a preventative for NAFLD. So making sure you're eating at least a carton of eggs a week, ideally 2, or consuming liver as part of the diet, but eggs will be more accessible. And it's the yolks in the egg that have the choline, not the white. So they're things that taking paracetamol or ibuprofen, drinking, a few drinks, a few nights a week, having some sodas or whatever else in America has high fructose corn syrup in it. Those things they seem quite benign. They're everyday things. And this is why so many people are developing these liver diseases, that once it ticks over into this state of disease, and it ticks over into this dysfunction state, then again, it can be like that movie Logan, where once it loses the ability to regenerate, then it starts to really suffer because now it can't bounce back, and then that builds up over time. So it is prevalent. It's something that if you're looking after your health and you're looking after your general diet, lifestyle, you're staying lean, you're training, you're focusing on eating good quality nutrition, it's not something that you should have a problem with. But it is always something that you should keep an eye on as part of your annual testing. And if you are having these vague, weird symptoms where you're just not tolerating your HRT and you're getting side effects, definitely worth getting a liver panel included as part of a comprehensive metabolic panel. And especially like if I've got a liver panel that's kind of on the fence in terms of, does this need an ultrasound, does it not? if I look at the CRP, if I look at the triglycerides, if I look at the A1C, if there's abnormalities in those, it will be a signifier that we're going, okay, we've got some inflammation, we've got some metabolic issues. Let's look at the liver. So it is important to have someone who knows what they're talking about when they're dealing with this, but when in doubt, get a test.
One question I had, and a bunch of people have asked me this, that I've never quite looked into it. Injectable glutathione, is that prescription only, or can that be ordered online or that type of thing?
Well, you can order anything online. As far as I'm aware, it's prescription only. In Australia, it's prescription only. I believe it's prescription only in the States, but I'm sure that it's one of those things where if you can get injectable, I'm not going to get into that. I'm sure it's gettable.
Gotcha. Yeah. Anything we didn't cover, Dave?
I think that's it. I think that covers pretty much everything around it. I think that the most important thing to understand here is that these are templates. With that said, like they're templates that I've put up on my Instagram, my Facebook, and people message me all the time saying, hey, I did this. Here's my radiology report before and after. And people are copy and pasting it and getting great results with it. So just when it comes to, if you want to take one of these approaches and give it a try yourself, when in doubt, go for a minimal effective dose and titrate up. You can always start low and work up. Don't just go in full swinging and just go, oh, back down if I get side effects. I understand that mentality. That's what men are like. But start low, titrate up. When in doubt, divide the dose as well. Split it up. Take supplements with meals, especially when we're looking at something like this. But dividing the dose up for liver protocols makes it makes way more sense when we're looking at nutrients that aren't esterized. They don't have a delayed half-life. Is split it up over the course of the day. Don't just bolus it all first thing in the morning. But yeah, I think
did that myself. If you recall, I was asking about liver, and I'm like, oh, just get everything. So I got the inositol and the choline and the glutathione SR from Thorne, and I got the NAC, and I got the Tutka, and I got a couple other things. I just said, fuck it, I'm going to take all of them. And yeah, within a week, I was like, I don't feel the same as before. I was feeling really off. And I just ditched them all. So yeah, one thing at a time. I'm the big proponent of one thing at a time, and I still wind up taking a bunch of stuff at the same time because kind of stupid like that sometimes.
But this is how you've learned the importance of doing one thing at a time. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we make the mistakes so you don't have to. So that's pretty much it, guys. It is it's something where if you've never looked at your liver health and you're not thriving, like if you're 10 out of 10, you're kicking ass, you're doing super well, get it checked next time you get a comprehensive annual test and you'll be fine. But if you're not thriving and you've got issues with stubborn insulin resistance, that's not the only thing, but if that's just one thing that's plagued so many guys, is this stubborn reactive hypoglycemia, insulin resistance that just doesn't really make any sense, won't go away. And if you've got these kind of widespread secondary hormone issues, if you were obese during puberty, if you grew up on a junk food diet, if you drank a whole bunch of booze when you were 18 to 25, all of these things, if they are a part of your history and you're not thriving, just go get your liver checked. An ultrasound is non-invasive, and it will give you an objective view of your liver to go, is there something wrong here? If it is, treat it. If not, don't worry about it. But rather than worrying about it or keeping yourself up at night or spending money on supplements to go, oh, I wonder if I take this, I'll feel better. Go get a test, be strategic, treat it, get rid of it, and then move on with your life.
Awesome. So guys that want to reach you, I'm going to leave obviously all the links in the description down below here on the screen and pinned comment in the video. There's the Advanced Fundamental Health Facebook group, which is a private paid Facebook group. You've got just a limited number of people in there, from my understanding, correct?
Correct. There's a paywall up to keep it small. It's the Cool Kids Club. So it's mainly for my clients. I made a group for my clients, and then I wanted to make that group available for people who weren't my clients because they couldn't get accessibility to book with me. But there is a paywall there to keep people out, because it is these groups can go downhill quickly if there's not a sense of community. So if you want to join, feel free. If you don't want to join, totally cool. One thing I would recommend for people is and this is I think this is the first time I have self-promoted because I'm not a fan of it, but I wrote an ebook called TRT 101. I wrote this book because I cannot handle the amount of inquiries I have. I'm usually booked out for, about 6 months in advance for new clients now. And I wanted to be able to take that message in terms of what I have put together and have it accessible to people all over the world. So it's $30 Australian, which is like probably like $15 US. And it's not a cookie cutter approach. It's an instruction manual. It's my templatized approach. It's not what is TRT? Why should you do TRT? It's this is how you do it, step by step, laid out. And that approach is what I use as a template when I work with my clients, coaching them. And it's something that I am very excited to have available for people, because TRT is something that is not done right a lot of the time, and empowering people to be able to do it right themselves means that they're going to be able to screen for the best practitioners possible. Because it's like if you know cars, you're going to find a good mechanic. And I think that's the idea with this. Is it's not saying, hey, this is how you service your car. It's saying, hey, this is a rough guide of what it looks like so that you can work with your doctor on this. But you can use it as a screening protocol for finding good doctors who know how to practice. I've got all my recommendations for practitioners in there as well, but TRT 101 is available on advancedfundamentalhealth.com. You can also contact me there for inquiries for bookings and to join my private Facebook group. Otherwise, I've got videos with Danny here. I've got videos all over YouTube talking about a whole bunch of the more niche stuff. And it's been a pleasure to talk about something that I've been wanting to talk about for a while.
Good. About freaking time. Well, I've been asking you for I don't know how long.
We got there in the end. I've been busy. you are very high on my list of priorities, but there's a few people like Ali Gilbert who just take precedence.
Yeah, but she's just a pain in the ass.
I know, that's why she's just so annoying that I have to pander to her day and night.
Dave, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Very welcome. Thank you for having me.